My first teacher, the then Shankaracharya of the north of India, gave an analogy. He said, in order to enter the big house, we have to first come out of the small house. And we sit for some time in between the two. And gradually the memory of the big house comes to us. So you have undertaken the initial stages of the self-investigation process. And the initial stages of self-investigation involve what's called the neti-neti process. I'm not this, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my sensations, I'm not my perceptions. In other words, as you rightly said, I'm not my body or my mind. But the neti-neti process is only the first stage of the path of self-inquiry or self-investigation. It doesn't lead, it's a preface to, but it doesn't culminate in the recognition of our true nature. It only tells us what we are not. It is necessary to see what we are. It is not enough to simply see that the rope is not a snake. We have to see the rope. If our investigation only takes us as far as it is not a snake, then there is still the possibility that later on we may mistake it for a stick or a shadow or a puddle. So we have to go further than just seeing it is not a snake. We have to see it is a rope. We have to go further than seeing simply what I am not. Although that is a prelude, we have to see what we are. In other words, what we are has to see what it is. What we are is not something that we can know. It's not something that is separate from us. I don't mean to suggest that what we are is something that is separate from that which sees it. When I say we have to see what we are, I mean I have to know what I am. The I that I am has to know itself clearly. You, awareness, it's true you are not a body or a mind. You have to see that you are awareness, and that awareness shares none of the qualities and therefore none of the limitations of the body or mind. In other words, you have to see that you are not temporary, you are not finite, you are inherently peaceful. In other words, you cannot be disturbed. And how do we see clearly what we essentially are? Well, in exactly the same way that we see clearly what anything essentially is. If you want to know what something is, you give it your attention. If you want to know about mathematics, you give your attention to mathematics. If you want to know about music, you direct your attention towards music. Whatever you want to deeply investigate, you simply give that thing your attention. And as a result of shining the light of your attention on that object, what it is, gradually or suddenly, becomes clear. So it's exactly the same thing here. If you want to know what you essentially are, you have to give yourself your attention. That is the essence of self-inquiry or prayer. The neti-neti process, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, is really just a prelude to we could say that it is the self-inquiry aspect, but this giving our attention to ourself would be better described as self-abidance. We are no longer going through a process. I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my sensations, I am not my perceptions. We realize I am only I. So awareness, it doesn't have to direct its knowing towards itself, because it is already standing at itself. Just as the sun doesn't need to direct its light towards itself, because it illuminates itself just by being itself. So it is in this self-abidance that this is what the Shankaracharya meant when he said we have to sit between the two houses, and the memory of the big house gradually becomes clear. Gradually, in most cases, occasionally, suddenly, but gradually, in most cases, becomes clear. So you have to know, you, awareness, have to become interested in yourself. That is, interested in the experience of simply being aware. What are the qualities, if we can call them qualities, that are innate or intrinsic in simply being aware, independent of what we are aware of? For instance, if we visualize awareness like a space, it's not a space, it has no dimensions. But we can't think of or visualize something without dimensions. So let's consent to imagine it as a space, an empty space. So explore the empty space of awareness, which is another way of saying explore the experience of being aware. Can the experience of being aware, or the space of awareness, be disturbed? For instance, is there anything we could do, relatively speaking, to disturb I'm not talking of the space of awareness now, I mean the physical space of this room, it's just an analogy. Is there anything we could do that would disturb or agitate the physical space of this room? No, nothing at all. Same thing. Can the knowing space, or the knowing space-like presence of awareness, be disturbed by anything that takes place in experience? No. Well, remember, this space-like presence of awareness, we're talking about yourself. Can you ever be disturbed by anything that takes place in experience? No. So if that's clear to you, then you have direct access to the peace of your true nature under all circumstances. Is there anything that the space of this room needs from any of the objects or people inside it? Does it stand to gain anything by the appearance of anyone or anything within it, or does it stand to lose anything when that person or object leaves? Obviously not. It is always in the same complete, fulfilled condition. Likewise, the space-like presence of awareness. Does it stand to gain anything or lose anything by whatever takes place in experience? No. That means you. Who you essentially are is inherently fulfilled. Not fulfilled as a result of what does or does not take place in experience. Your fulfillment, your happiness, is prior to experience. And therefore you need no longer look towards objects, activities, relationships in order to make you happy. You have direct access to peace and fulfillment in yourself. So you have to see clearly who you are. To see what you are not is a good first step. I'll just go more and more deeply into who you really are. That is the experience of being aware, or the space-like presence of awareness. And its qualities will, in most cases, gradually reveal themselves to you, and you will find yourself at peace and fulfilled almost all the time. I say almost because I just leave a possibility. We never know what's around the corner.
It makes me curious, though, who's running this show?
Well, the one who is running the show is the one in whom the show is taking place, with which the show is known, and out of which the show is made, because that is the only one, the only entity, if we can call it an entity. Of course it's not an entity. That is the only one that is present in the show. There is no other element present in the show other than consciousness. So who is running the show? The only one that's present.
The way you described it up till now, it sounds as if my essential nature, our essential nature is observing, and not so much the part that you describe now as the one who creates the show.
Were you here last night?
Yes.
Were you here yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, so you're right. The reason that you say it appears that our true nature is just the observer of experience is because we have only taken, as I said earlier this morning, we're only going to explore the first half of these two paths. We've only explored the inward-facing path, in which we separate ourselves out from the objects of experience in order to clearly see what we are. And this only takes us halfway. You're right. If we were to stop there, as indeed some classical schools of Advaita do, then we would still be in duality. In this case, it wouldn't be the duality between myself, the body-mind, and everyone and everything else, but it would rather be a duality between my self-awareness and the objects of experience. So we would have upgraded duality, but we would not have dissolved it. So you're right. But it is valid to spend time on this inward-facing path, because it clearly establishes the presence, the primacy, and the nature of consciousness. And then, when not just the presence and the primacy of consciousness have been established, but its nature has been recognized, we then return to the objects of experience and collapse the apparent distinction between them. So I define consciousness or awareness as that in which all experience appears, that with which all experience is known, and that out of which all experience is made. The inward-facing path deals with the first two elements of this definition. That in which experience appears and that with which experience is known. So if we only included these two elements, there would be a separation between consciousness and its objects. So in the third element of the definition, consciousness is that out of which all experience is made. We collapse the distinction between consciousness and experience, or consciousness and objects. But I want to go slowly and very experientially, and to be sure that we take this pathway inwards or selfwards or backwards to discover what we essentially are, and we spend time there exploring its nature, its qualities, if we can call them qualities, which means the absence of any objective qualities. In other words, until we really feel, not just understand, but feel that the essential nature, the prior nature of ourself is peace and fulfillment. And then we return to the objects of experience.